as we understand the agreement today between the US and the Taliban to reduce violence towards a peace process, there is no explanation about these kind of specifics. Every party have their own particular interpretation of how they would like to be part of a future Afghanistan set up politically and in security terms as well. So as far as the Taliban are concerned, they clearly, in the messaging that they give out and the kind of the statements that they've put out post signing the deal in Doha on the 29th of February, they are very clear that they've won. So it's a very victorious narrative. The Afghan government, on the other hand, who also signed a declaration with the United States government at the same time as this deal was being signed in Doha, they have their own interpretation of what it means, and they consider themselves to be the legitimate government, and it's about the Taliban coming and being absorbed. So currently, as we look at the situation, neither side are saying they will disintegrate as a result of a political intra-Afghan dialogue phase. The biggest trouble, especially in the north of the country and latterly in other parts of the country, have been the militias that are loyal to the so-called warlords. And that's much more difficult because we don't know the exact numbers, we don't know who they are, as much as we don't know who to speak to bring these people and rein them in. And they've been involved in a lot of criminality, it's been documented, but unfortunately nobody has spoken, at least publicly discussed, and by that I mean the United States, the NATO, the Afghan government and the Taliban, about any kind of position on how it would look like post a deal signing or into Afghan dialogue on the question of demobilization of the armed individuals, groups and militias. We look at the numbers of the billions spent, but often we don't understand that actually the billions spent largely was spent on a war economy. And by the war economy, what I mean is largely it was a military endeavor that was funded in Afghanistan. So both the money that the international spent in the largest amounts and the Afghan government that is still spending, the majority of the expenditures on security, and by that is counterinsurgency, is building an army and all that stuff. So that's number one. Number two, a war economy also means that any construction, civilian interventions, anything else that happens is ultimately done with a view that there's a war that's ongoing, and how does all this fit in? So I think when it comes to guarantees, people are very much into tangibles. They want to see a demonstration effect of what peace means. So for a lot of people, the idea that you would meet in a five-star hotel in the Middle East and talk about peace and bring out some kind of a declaration, okay, it's exciting, but people want to feel it in their daily life. And for that, a reduction of violence, an absence of violence eventually is very much what people would desire and would see that as a way of a confidence building measure, as a way of a guarantee. Frankly, the majority of Afghans who are not part of the political stakeholder team, so the elite and the sort of the Taliban and the people with the guns, the majority of society don't really have leverage. And if their voices were to be considered, we would not be where we are today. 20 years down the line, this conflict, people have been demanding for a long time cessation of violence. They just want basic rights, basic humanity. And for that, because as a wider society, they're very disenfranchised, they live under the shadow of violence from all sides, there isn't much that they can do. I would say the biggest challenge is the role of the United States. What is the United States aiming to do about this peace process? Is it just an intention to cut the troops levels and then just leave eventually because that's what President Trump promised the electorate? And if that is the biggest threat and it's the biggest equilibrium equation, whatever we call it, so that's the biggest factor.